Hello folks, Richard Moore here, and I want to do a follow-up, if you will, on a story I did a few weeks back. And this is a continuing story. This, by any stretch of the imagination, is the end of the story. And what I'm referring to is the unexplained death of Caleb Chandler Griggs. So, for those that already know the high points, if you will, of the story, those that don't, initially his death, there's been very little information, or at least public information, since his death, July the 9th, 2017, in Daphne, or Daphne, if you will, Alabama. And so that's down near the Mobile area. But I want to clarify for those that are following this. At times, people, if it's not what you say, or it may be what you don't say. But I want to clarify these things where I've positioned my thought process on Caleb's death. And I don't believe that it was an accident on his behalf. People are quick to jump to conclusions, and they jump to the obvious scapegoat, who they can scapegoat in a situation. But I think that we need to caution ourselves when we do that. I believe that it was these perfect storm situations, if you will, all have some very common threads. And I'm not just speaking of Caleb's death, but other deaths that I've talked about, and there's a lot that I haven't talked about. There's only so much time to properly address these things. Caleb was a good kid. Anybody that knew him, he was well liked. He had a lot of friends. And but we're not going to make this, I'm not going to make it, and I don't think anyone else should, make this untimely death of Caleb Griggs, make this a situation where they're looking, giving a kind of a crooked look to maybe the mother, Charlotte, or even his dad, Dale. This is not about Charlotte or Dale. Now, mind you, I've not had a conversation with either one of them. And to my knowledge, I never have had a conversation with them. So, and I haven't received information from either one of them as it pertains to what I'm talking about, or information at all. So, it's easy, and I have gotten so much feedback from so many different people that would like to take the spotlight and put it over on the mother, or to put it over on the dad. And this is the purpose of me doing this video today. This is I believe this is the first fallacy of those that are interested in knowing the truth. I think that the family deserves justice, and the family deserves truth. They don't deserve to have fingers pointed at them as are implicating that somehow their behavior or the company they kept or the places they went or anything else cannot, and I believe that I can firmly stand on that, cannot be distracted by attempting to point a finger at those two. So there's no question in my mind of the love and affection that both parents had for their son. So I want to clarify that. Also clarify that a lot of the things that were said, and I did mention that they mentioned this close relationship with his dad, and based on a lot of things that were reported and talked about at the time, didn't jibe with the way I remember things. Now, we know that through circumstances that were beyond, of course, Caleb's control, that there was some absentee in some places in his life when maybe his father wasn't around. But nevertheless, that has nothing to do with their affection for each other and what have you. The point I'm trying to make, or tried to make, and will continue, is that these discrepancies, don't know where that came from, but the discrepancies, ever so subtle and meant to just be just someone talking, I think is a little more than that. So if we can isolate this situation to Caleb, his circle of friends, and those that we haven't named, there's some that their names will probably come up later. And so initially, the story was the story was the day the news was given, and this coming from Wren, that Caleb had a pistol, didn't know it was loaded, and pulled the trigger, and that was the deal. And of course, even that story has been corrected by one of the individuals that was there on the scene. His recollection wasn't a pistol, but it was in fact a rifle that was accidentally discharged. It's a big difference between playing with a pistol and putting it in your mouth and pretending and didn't realize it was loaded. That was one of the stories given. I don't know how many of you got that same story. Immediately, it was Caleb wouldn't. That's not him. It's non-characteristic. Now, the possibility of someone being able to take a rifle and playing with it and accidentally shoot themselves is a stretch as well. We know that rifles have a long barrel, and it just doesn't make sense. And I don't think it jibes with what really happened. So what really happened? I'm going to assume that the family, and from what I can gather, that the family from the get-go suspected they were not getting the whole story. Usually, when this happens, and believe me, no one knows their child better than their parents. They know their mannerisms, their habits, they know how they think, everything. And rightfully so. And so when they're getting something that is not indicative to their child, I'm sure they're going to question it. And then when they make contact with those in positions of trust, in this case, law enforcement, and for some reason, it begins to look more and more like something is not measuring up. It would be different if law enforcement was completely transparent and answered all the questions, followed any leads, and made sure that by the time this was settled business, that everybody was satisfied that they had the right story. However, that did not happen. It has not happened. And so I think that any parent or loved one that has gone through this, and I've done stories on many, would have to agree that if there's still things that they're not matching up. But law enforcement has not made an effort to match it up. And when they do that, that leaves a lot of loose ends. And usually these loose ends will end up with individuals and people focusing on the parents or the loved one that is continuing to beat the drum of justice. This is not right. This is a miscarriage of justice. The only plausible explanation is not that they do not have the answers. I find it strange that, and I can speak for myself in many cases that I know of, that that law enforcement has the ability to construct and manufacture crimes that never took place, blow by blow. I find that deplorable. I find it very disturbing that we have law enforcement that are willing to go to those lengths. In other words, to those lengths to muzzle and shut up the messenger. And so this is one of the things that I've had to deal with. As I stated in the other video, that when I started bringing up this business of Caleb, people that I didn't even know, but people that didn't know the situation or him as well. That's not how it happened. Quit talking about it. It was like, it wasn't, and the individual that said this, it wasn't, I wasn't talking about it. Not to her. I wasn't talking about it to anybody, but mentioned it to someone that's very close to him. And how it got to this strain, I have no idea. And this particular person made sure, working with members of law enforcement and so forth, on some minor rule violations and quick order, I was looking at a jail cell. They got me out of the way real quick. This was the focal point of, I was absolutely just, I knew that they had manufactured just minor rule violations that I couldn't even tell you what, but I can tell you this. What was pressing through the whole thing was the fact that I had been told to let it go and not talk about it. So much so that the individual telling me that, it was as if, and it was, she was receiving that from someone in authority. Why would someone in authority with a badge deliver and have delivered a very loud message to quit talking about it and and then also have the authority to do the things and make sure I was locked away, out of the way for essentially 10 months. And so when you've got all that going on, it's hard to concentrate on anything other than self-survival. There are those that were close to Caleb that know that perhaps there was someone else, the common thread, if you will, in his little group of his little social group, the close-knit social group. I believe this is the lie that's being protected at all costs. Outside of the knowledge of either parent. It was designed to have people jumping all over the map, pointing fingers at each other. And until that stops, we may never get the truth. But I can tell you this, we don't have the truth right now. There's no question that we don't have the truth. There's no question that there's individuals involved in this that have reputations and careers at stake. And I emphasize careers. Those in a position of trust that exploited and are still exploiting people in North Mississippi. And I've spoken on this many times. And because we don't recognize the telltale signs of how this organization works. And what is this organization? Well, it is a product of what is known as community-oriented policing. And how they operate. This is with law enforcement running it. And how they operate. They operate by circumventing due process, civil liberties, constitutional rights. They operate in the area where a prying eye would immediately say, well, of course, this is obviously they're doing something illegal, and if it's learned that a law enforcement individual is involved, well, it must be legal. But in either way, that's not something that is talked about outside and even within their own circle. They're forbidden to have discussions even with someone that may be participating in some type of activity. All in the name of having a safer neighborhood and all this kind of stuff. That's the window dressing. What is the perk for those that are engulfed in this? The perk is, well, who knows what these people have held over their head. This is what we got and all this stuff, and it's good enough that seldom they question outside of that conversation. They're satisfied. They're also made aware that there's nothing they say or do that they can consider confidential. So they know that there's a close eye on them. If that's the case, and there is that close eye, and I know it is, and they know it is, then that means that we've got sort of 4 people plus Caleb, 5 people in that room. But in real time, others in real time were well aware of what was going on and taking place. That's the part of the story that needs to come out and needs to be looked at. And this is the part of the story where it gets very dangerous. alive, not just for those that dare speak about it, but for those that that know that exactly what I'm telling them is in fact the facts. I think it's deplorable. And I put myself in the same position as the family. What would I do? I can tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't shut up. I wouldn't let up. And it wouldn't be about how many people said I need to let it go or accuse me of being unhinged or unbalanced or anything else. So I'm not saying that this is happening with either parent. But for those that are watching this, I challenge you to make sure that you're not one of those. This is about Caleb, and this is about we're not getting the story. Neither parent is getting the story. This is not about their parents, and it should never be considered a slight or anything else of something that is a repercussion of something that the parents might have done or not have done. That is what those that are not named would love for the rest of the world to buy into, because it's so easy. It's almost a perfect crime, isn't it? It's a crime. Do I believe that it was an accident? No. I'm sorry. I'm not buying that. If that was the deal, we'd still be asking questions. I wouldn't be talking about it. Because I don't have an axe to grind directly or by proxy by talking about this. It's very difficult to talk about this. It's difficult, and it will be 100 years from now. This is never easy. As I look at so many things that I don't broadcast, that from autopsy reports and stuff from victims, and it will take its toll. And you see a part of this that I see a part that very few outside the family see. And so what I experience is it's not comfortable. And we can only imagine if it was your own blood, your own child. There's no way that I or anyone else other than their parents could walk in those shoes of grief and many times rage of the topic of this with their child constantly being the elements of rumors and hearsays, knowing that the whispers and so forth try to implicate that somehow that it was. No, I can set everybody's conscience at rest there. It does not. I see too many people that make mistakes in life, or people that are caught up in something that they absolutely didn't know they were caught up in. They stepped into something they didn't know they stepped into, and it got nothing to do with their raising, and it is no reflection of their home life. This is not about someone's raising or their home life or their parents. Neither one were in that hotel room. And you can rest assured that if they, either one, had a clue, close to a clue, as who was responsible and those responsible, then all of hell wouldn't stop either one of them from bringing that person to justice ever how they saw fit. Being said that hadn't happened, we know that those individuals are still enjoying the hidden and the best kept secret in the country. But we know that there's more to it. And we're going to continue to talk about it. And we know, I know, and many of you know, there's been some details, maybe details that you think are insignificant, but may be significant. My email address is posted in the comments section. You can contact me. You'll remain anonymous. Your name won't be broadcasted. If you have something that you would like to add to this, one way that we get to the bottom of these things is by exposure and by talking about it. For those that have been faithful with sharing and subscribing, I urge you to continue to do that. And with this exposure, we know that there's individuals out there that, for their own reasons, maybe in fear of their own safety, and that's more likely than not. But I don't see how anyone could carry that for the rest of their life. Some people need to get that off their chest, whether it's significant or not. So I'm urging you to do that. And let's try to bring some more light on to the untimely death, murder of Caleb Griggs. Until next time, God bless you.